We're shooting for A's here, people. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It has been a morning already and it is only about 11 o'clock. I woke up with a screaming headache. Maybe I slept wrong or I don't know, but I'm gonna take something for that. I'm gonna make my coffee and eat my breakfast. And then we're gonna jump right into some tips that I use to get good grades in college. And as always, if you like this video and want to see more, definitely hit that subscribe button and the notification bell, hit the like and drop a comment down below. And I hope you guys enjoy. Bye. This is another one of my favorite coffees to make at home. It has a variety of spices, including turmeric. This is really good. It's like a spicy, sweet chai type drink. I just wanted to put a little disclaimer out there. I am not posting this video to brag about how I got amazing grades. I just wanted to be maybe a source of motivation for you guys, because we all have obstacles in our lives that might make it more difficult to get good grades or to get a degree in the first place. I think with the right tools and mindset, you can really kind of push those obstacles aside and really focus and get to your goals and make it happen for yourself. I just wanted to say that I don't mean to talk about my daughter as an obstacle, because she is honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me and I love her so much. However, statistics show that it is a lot less likely for young moms to get a college degree after they've already had a baby. It's definitely harder with a kid, but it's not impossible. And there's so many other people, so many other moms that are in college and killing it, by the way. Well, I'm gonna have to do the tips later because Ava's awake. So if you guys don't know, I am actually double majoring in business marketing and pre-nursing, and yes, they're very different fields, and I'm gonna make a video on the reason behind deciding to go to nursing school. So yes, I am a senior in business marketing. I have about 23 credits left, and after this summer course is over, I will have just 2 pre-nursing classes left before I can go to nursing school. So that's all really fun and exciting. Last semester, spring of 2020, I was taking 19 credits. It was kind of interesting how I came to taking 19 credits. One of the pre-nursing courses is Intro to Psychology. For my college particularly, Intro to Psychology is a weed out class. My advisor actually told me that I should take it through a different campus, so I ended up taking it online through a different campus connected with this whole school system. But it was just weird because I registered for the class and then they ended up telling me that it was full and that I couldn't take it, and then I heard nothing back. After multiple emails to this person, I heard nothing back, and so then a few days before the semester was gonna start, I got a notification that my class had been posted, and I was like, oh, well, do I take this class or do I not take it? Because I was already at this point taking 16 credits, and I was like, well, whatever, I'll take it. So I ended up taking 19 credits. I was taking chemistry, human development, psychology, nutrition, and then 2 business courses. One was a business management class, and then one was a sales class. And actually, most of them were online. The chemistry class and the sales class were the only ones that I actually had in person. It was a lot easier only transferring 2 classes from in person to online than it would have been to transfer all of my classes. However, it was still a learning curve for everyone because chemistry, obviously there's a lab attached to it and it's a lot of in-person things. And then the same goes with the sales class. There was no lab, but our class discussions were just that. They were discussions and interactive components and whatnot. So those 2 classes were kind of difficult to transition to online from. But anyway, that is my background in the classes that I was taking, and I ended up getting a 4.0, you guys. When I tell you I worked hard, I worked so hard to get that. I actually pulled off a 4.0 at the last minute. I had all A's in my pre-nursing classes, but funny enough, in my online business management class, I had a A- all semester. With the final and the final paper, I ended up bumping it up to an A by just like a couple tenths of a point, which was amazing. So given all that, I have compiled a list of 16 different tips that I use every semester, or at least that I have learned throughout the years. So yeah, if you are ready to dive into these, let's go. These are in no particular order. So tip number 1 is to get organized right away. And what I mean right away, I don't mean on the first day of school. I mean if you can get organized beforehand, before the semester even starts, do that. A lot of times classes will be posted a few days prior, and a lot of times they won't. So if you only have the opportunity to get organized on the first day, take advantage of that first day. But if you have the opportunity to get organized beforehand, definitely do that. And the reason why I like to get organized prior to the semester is that the first week, syllabus week, a lot of people think that there's not a ton going on. However, and I guess it depends on the college, but my business classes, all the pre-nursing classes, start lecturing on the first day. They expect you to start reading and to start doing your homework on the first week. So by being organized before the semester even starts, it kind of mitigates the whole overwhelming feeling of all this homework all of a sudden. And brings me to tip number 2, and that is take syllabus week seriously, and don't think that you don't have to do work on syllabus week. If your college is anything like mine, they expect you to be getting stuff done that first week. And if you're like, oh, I don't have anything to do this week, and then all of a sudden the week later and the couple weeks later you're going to be cramming for exams because you didn't put in work that first week. Tip number 3 is have a realistic homework schedule. And what I mean by that is plan out your day based on how much homework you can get done, because if you are scheduling yourself so much and then you have other things going on and you don't end up getting to everything, then maybe you'll fall behind. You also want to take a look at your homework and whatever reading assignments you may have and kind of make a mental note of how long that will take you. It does take some time to get used to that, because a lot of times you'll think, oh, this is going to take me 30 minutes, and then it ends up taking you like 4 hours. Tip number 4 is to schedule you time. I know that can be kind of non-existent in college a lot of times, especially if you're trying to get really good grades. However, this is gonna really help you to not get burnt out with your studies and keep going and be motivated for the long term. That was a nice segue into my next tip. Tip number 5 is to try to get your work done earlier in the day, because a lot of times if you have a busy day with studies and just like going to class and whatnot, then you might not feel as inclined to do your studies later in the day, and then if you don't feel like doing it, then you're going to procrastinate it to the next day and the next day, and then all of a sudden you're going to be crunched for time and cramming. And when you are crunched for time like that, a lot of times your grades might suffer. I'm not saying that cramming doesn't work, because there are many times where I have had to cram in the past. If you don't want to be super overwhelmed, I would suggest doing your work earlier in the day. My next tip is to be flexible with how you learn. By that, I don't mean just do all these sorts of things to try to see how you learn. You should probably know how you learn best. However, there are different classes set up in different ways and different requirements for each class that might require you to study a different way. An amazing example of this is business school versus science classes and nursing, pre-nursing classes. They're very different from each other, and the way I study for each of those kind of categories of classes is very different. So if I go into a class thinking I need to use flashcards, and flashcards aren't working for me, they're not helping me retain this information, I need to change my study strategy to better adapt to that class and the requirements of that class so that I'm able to get an A. My next tip has to do more with how you study for exams, for quizzes, whatever you have going on. Although I am flexible with how I study for different classes, this is kind of an overarching kind of idea of how I like to study for each class. So that is focusing on the big picture before you understand the little details. So a lot of times in college, and especially in pre-nursing classes, you're being given so much information at once. It's hard to take that in and kind of see how it's all connected to really understand it. If you just ingest the information and then maybe take a step back and say, okay, so this is the guidelines that I'm working with, and this is the major concept. If you understand the major concept, then you can break it down into the little points and the more specific information that you need to know. Piggybacking off of that is studying for exams and how I make my study guides. I focus on the big picture, so I actually just make a list of the main topics that are going to be covered on the exam, and that's all I do. I don't write the little details in the study guide. I just write the big major topics, and then when I go back to study later, I can cross-reference the study guide with my notes that have the specific information that I need to know. As I'm studying, I go off of that basic study guide, and I personally like to talk about it, so maybe I'm just talking to myself, but I am saying that information out loud, and a lot of times I get that information down so well that I don't have to look at my notes. I can just look at the main topic and just spill it. I can just spill it to anyone like I'm teaching someone, and I think a lot of people say that if you can teach someone what you're learning, you have really mastered the information and you really understand what's going on. My next tip is something that probably all college YouTubers will say, but I want to spin it in a different aspect to make you think about it a little differently. And so that tip is to go to class. If you are crunched for time or taking a lot of credits like I was, or you have other things going on, you have a job, you have children, whatever you have going on, it can be kind of difficult to schedule time to actually study for exams and really learn the information well. If you just go to class and listen and take good notes, when it comes to exam time, maybe you don't have to study as much. Maybe you just have to brush up on your notes. You already have ingested and learned that information, you just have to go over it one more time. Whereas if you don't go to class, you haven't even learned that material yet. You're just gonna have to teach yourself that information, and it's gonna be a lot harder for you. My next tip has to do with participation in class. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of my classes in business school, you're graded on participation, and even in the pre-nursing classes, they have those little clicker things where you answer questions and whatnot, but specifically for discussion-based classes, if you are graded on participation, it can be a little nerve-wracking when your teacher might call on you on a question that you might not know, and so this is a little cheat way to assure that you're getting good participation points, but not feel so nervous when you're in class. Say you're having a discussion and your teacher asks a question and she's asking for volunteers. If you know that question and you haven't answered a question yet that day, volunteer and say, I know the answer, and say a really good answer for that, because then later on if she asks another question that maybe you don't know and you don't want to be put on the spot, if you've already participated and answered the question, she's gonna make somebody else answer it who hasn't really participated in the class. My next tip is to break up your studying and homework. I have been doing this so much lately. This summer I'm just taking 2 classes, anatomy and physiology and a business class, and let me tell you, my business class is boring. Like, oh my gosh, it's so hard to get through the assignments. So what I mean by breaking up your assignments is if you know that you don't like a certain class or you find a certain class really boring or whatnot, but you have to take it, do a couple things for that class and do something more interesting and go back to it, because a lot of times when I've been trying to do the homework for this class, I end up just wasting my time. I have a show on and I'm not paying attention to what I'm actually typing, and then it could have taken me 30 minutes to get this done, but all of a sudden it's 2 hours and I'm not even done yet. And that's just not an efficient way to study, to get things done, especially being a mom or whatever you have going on. You don't have time to do that. So break up your studying with something more interesting, with the more not interesting things, if that makes sense. Whew. Next tip, do all the extra credit. Unless you're at like the end of the semester and you know you have like a 99% and you don't have to take the final, do all the extra credit. Because who knows if you're gonna bomb the next exam or if you're gonna get a B on the next exam, whatever. We're shooting for A's here, people. In the grand scheme of things, when you're thinking about the point allocation for each requirement for the class, an A is like really close to being perfect in the class. One slip up, a couple slip ups can really cost you, and if your class offers extra credit, do it. My next tip is to, well, a lot of people maybe don't get to class early, but if you do get to class early, then use that time before class to do easy tasks. Last semester, for one of my business classes that was online, there were these little surveys that we had to do, kind of reflecting on ourselves based on the information that we've been learning. Those were really easy little tasks that we actually were graded on. I would do those before my chemistry lecture. For whatever reason, I was that weirdo who got to an 8 a.m. early. And I even think that's weird because I've never really been a morning person, and for whatever reason I was just like so focused on getting to class early, so I would usually get there at like 7:30. I was like the second one there. So maybe that's another tip. Maybe get to class early. I don't know. Maybe that's 16.2 tip. I don't know. Take this next tip with a grain of salt because everybody's school is different and everybody's professor is different, but this is just kind of what I have seen from a basic undergraduate standpoint in the information. Maybe the class requires you to read the textbook, and we all know that textbooks are packed with filler information that we don't really care about, don't really need to know. But oftentimes it can be kind of overwhelming and you maybe don't know what you need to know. This tip is to focus on the material that the professor actually says in the lecture, unless the professor explicitly says that there's going to be information on the exams that are not talked about in class. I would really take good notes in class, focus on what she was saying, and then when I would go to study for the exam, then I would supplement the material with the text and see if I can kind of merge those two information sources and kind of really get a good grasp on the information is that I need to know. That is a great segue into my next tip, which is to try to understand the information in different ways. This is something that my chemistry professor this last semester really stressed because the majority of the people taking intro to chemistry were freshmen, and a lot of them might not know how to study. They think it's just like high school, like they're gonna tell you what you need to know and that's like the wording, this is how you need to know it. However, in college you might be given certain information, but in the exams they're really trying to test your knowledge to see if you understand it, and by doing that they're not going to word it the same way. They are not testing your memorization mostly. They're testing that you know the concepts, you know how to apply this information into different scenarios. And so if you are studying, don't just memorize how one information source is wording it. Maybe think about it in a different way, or do a Google search and kind of find more wordings and get a good understanding of the information that you're working with. Last tip, you guys, if you're here, you did the right thing, because this is the most important tip. Most important. Because you can have all those other things, but if you don't have this one, you might not get a good grade still. This last tip is internal motivation. You have to be motivated to get good grades. And that might sound kind of obvious, but it has to be internal motivation. So what I mean by that is, like, when you're growing up, your parents say, oh, you have to get a good grade, you have to get a good grade, blah, 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 blah. Eventually, you're just not gonna care because you're like, oh, why? I don't care about getting a good grade. Why do I need to get a good grade? For me, I want to get a good grade because I want to go to nursing school and do well in nursing school so that I can then get a job in the field that I want to work in. This also comes to play with being a young mom. If you don't have kids, this might not apply to you, but if you do have kids, you always hear, oh, you're doing it for your family, you're doing this is why you're doing it. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to school for my family. However, I am becoming a nurse for myself. I want to be a nurse because I want to be a nurse. I was already on track to go into marketing, and I could very well make a fine living for my family in marketing, but that's not where I see myself going in the future. So my internal motivation is making me stay on top of my studies and get good grades so that I can go on to be a nurse someday. So whatever your why is, find that, and if you don't have it, then you need to figure that out before your grades suffer. And I'm not trying to be harsh with that, but you don't want to be doing something that you don't want to do or you don't care about. That's pretty obvious, but if you really find something that you want to do, that's gonna be a great step in the right direction to getting a good grade and just being successful in the future. Okay guys, that is all that I have for today. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys next week. Have a great week. Bye-bye.